right, welcome to our newest podcast, the WWII 506 podcasts. As you know, I number them completely randomly, as is my want. So this number is number 99, which is in honor of the great Phil Bennett that died recently. That is a very niche market, if you're listening, by the way. But Leighton knows what I'm talking about. On today's show, we have the one and only Tim Gray from the WWII Foundation. Tim, how you doing, mate?
Good. Thank you for having me on. It's good to see you guys again.
It's good to see you. It's been almost a week.
Almost a week. I'm feeling that longing again. So I'm glad we were able to fulfill my longing.
Passion's there. So I'm going to crack straight on with my questions. If you guys have got questions, jump in, dovetail anytime. Tell us about your background, Tim. What is your background in?
My background was as a television sportscaster. I was a journalism major in college and got out of college and was a TV sportscaster for 15 years around the country in the United States. So I did the news, like I would be the 6 and 11 o'clock broadcaster on the local news all over the country. So after 15 years of doing that, I hated it. And I said, it's time to do something else. And since I was a young kid, I was always interested in World War II. So I looked at my dad. My dad's like, well, what are you going to do now? And I said, I want to do documentary films on World War II. And he's like, he laughed because he was a former journalist. He said, well, how are you going to make a living doing that? And don't you think that's kind of a niche thing? And I said, yeah, it is, but that's where my passion is. So I left television in 2004. And then in 2006, we started making documentary films on World War II, traveling all over the world. And we've made 31 films to date. And they're all narrated by celebrities. And we donate them as part of our nonprofit mission, as part of the World War II Foundation, to PBS and American Public Television and schools and libraries and students, and just make all of them free. So we travel a lot. We spend a lot of time in Europe. We spend a lot of time in the Pacific on islands you've probably never heard of. But we shoot all of our films on location. So if we're doing a film on Normandy, we go to Normandy. If we're doing a film at Auschwitz, we go to Auschwitz. If we're doing a film at Guadalcanal or Peleliu or Iwo Jima, we go there. And a lot of the times we'll bring veterans back with us to kind of relive their memories of those places.
And is it like is it the Grey touring caravan like it was in Normandy? You have to bring the whole family.
Yeah, it's part of our mission is to educate. So when you have younger children, that is built into it. When you have a 16-year-old or you have somebody in their 20s, those are the people we want to let know about World War II. Those are the people we want to educate. So we try to bring family members when we can. So when I'm long gone and under the daisies, that they'll be able to talk about, the people they met, the veterans they met, the actors they met who portrayed the veterans, the places they've been. So I think we're kind of prepping the younger generation to carry on the legacy when, we're all gone. And I think that's what, you do as an actor when you portray someone like Floyd Talbert. A lot of people out there don't know what the real Floyd Talbert even looked like. They know you as Floyd Talbert, which is obviously an uncomfortable thing for you because, you had the honor of portraying that man, but he's gone. So the legacy rests with you now. And whether you like that or not, or feel comfortable with that or not, I think, you're carrying on the conversation. So people come up to you and want to know more about the World War II generation, Matt, and want to know more about Floyd Talbert. So that's your legacy as a Band of Brothers actor, is that you carry that on with you and you represent someone who doesn't, is not alive anymore, but played a big role in World War II.
Yeah, no pressure then. Goodness me.
No pressure at all.
It just keeps getting bigger. The pressure keeps getting bigger every year.
Yep.
So
it should. I think it should get bigger. And I think, all of the guys I've met will always tell me, and Leighton knows this, and Diane knows this, that it was more than a role for them. It wasn't just another role for them. They were portrayed somebody who helped save the world. And that's a big responsibility. So how you carry on as that character, which helped define your life, you represent that person who's no longer with us, but in effect helped save the world. So that is a big responsibility. And all of the guys who are actors from Band of Brothers in the Pacific know and carry on that legacy and know it wasn't just another role and just another TV series. I mean, it's a big burden, but you all do it so well.
Yeah, I think that struck me. It didn't strike me until we went to the premiere in Paris when we were all in the hotel together with all the veterans, and I was sort of hanging out and drinking with them 24/7 as they don't want to go to bed. And it struck me that these kind of like little, because they're all tiny, sort of frail old guys, you just like, yeah, because you were a badass. We do have to sort of let people know that this isn't some doddering old dude in the street. This guy saved the world. So yeah, as I get older, I do feel that responsibility more and more.
Yeah,
I mean,
you look at Bill Garnier and you look at Babe Heffron and guys like that. And, Babe was, 5'5", 5'6", thick neck. All those guys are gone. I mean, Brad Freeman really, Ed Shames passed away. So Brad Freeman is really the last guy of the 506 who represents the band of brothers who jumped into Normandy. But you look at them as older guys who, passed away in their 80s or 90s, and they were badasses. I mean, when they jumped into Normandy, Bill Garnier killed a lot of Germans. I mean, he was obviously in the series, we know what happened to his brother at Monte Cassino and everything else. But that's what I tell people here in the States, when you've got a 95-year-old guy in front of you at the grocery store, that guy is a bigger badass than you'll ever be in your entire life. He may have a cane now. He may be in his mid 90s or upper 90s and may not look, like he did back in 1944. He may be frail, but back in the day, he was as strong as could be, and mentally and physically. And again, he helped save the world. And it makes you kind of feel like, what have I done today when you got this guy in front of you who saved the world? So
I complained about my sandwich. It wasn't right.
Yeah, I know you did.
Yeah,
I heard that. Yeah. And,
no, I tell you, I was having a couple of drinks with Bill Garnier, and he'd got into it. He was loving it. He was getting into it. And he's just like, yeah, did a lot of killing that night, a lot of killing.
So
I couldn't resist it.
You complain about the weather and stuff, and you're like,
yeah,
well, I was a stone in a foxhole, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to complain about being cold today. So yeah,
I couldn't resist saying, so well, what's it like? They just said, I didn't feel nothing. They crush in a fucking buck. So okay.
How do you respond to that? I mean, it's like, how do you respond to that?
Yeah. He looked me dead in the eye when he said it as well. I was like, man, oh my goodness, my legs are shaking. So
it's intimidating.
It is intimidating. It's quite right, intimidating. So with the World War II Foundation, so you just kind of jumped straight into these movies. How did you? What is the network? What is the tendrils you got out there to be able to find guys, veterans, and take them back? And how wide does it spread? Is it just you and Sheila and the kids, or do you have a whole bunch of people helping you bring this to fruition?
We finally hired a CEO in 2017, but from 2006 to 2017, it was really just me. And you have to go out and you have to raise money. You look at stories that you hope will motivate the younger generation to want to learn more about World War II. So that's our goal. Our goal is not to give them a comprehensive overview of the war. Our goal is to find stories that they'll find fascinating. So they'll then go to Google and Google D-Day or Google Pearl Harbor or Google the specific veteran. So again, it's like we're the conduit to tell the story. And that's what we try to do. We look for the 14-year-old who joined the paratroopers in 1943 and help tell that story to motivate a 14-year-old to go and say, why did this guy in middle school go and join the paratroopers at 14 years old? So we try to look for interesting stories as the hook to get people to learn more about the war. And so we've grown as a foundation. We became a nonprofit in 2011. I added Sheila, who kind of runs, we have a museum as well with 5,000 artifacts here in Rhode Island. We're doing more virtual reality filming in addition to our documentary. So we try to educate how kids learn. And having a 16-year-old, Nora, having a 16-year-old, I look at World War II through her eyes. How does she want to learn? Well, she wants to learn on her iPhone. She wants to learn on her computer. She wants to learn on her iPad. So we make all of our resources available for students on their computer, on their iPad, on their iPhone. So there's no barrier to them going and learning about a story. about World War II, or going to our website and watching one of our films that we have uploaded there. So that's what's great about having younger kids. I look at her and say, well, how are you learning? And she's learning through TikTok, and she's learning through Instagram, and she's learning through Facebook. And it's not the traditional way that I learned. And you guys know that, when you travel, everyone wants to take a selfie with you. Everyone wants to do an Instagram with you. So that's how kids are learning. And we're doing a lot more virtual reality technology now through Oculus and Facebook and YouTube VR, where we're taking kids standing on Omaha Beach, and they're standing in the water, and they're hearing from veterans, and they're actually standing in front of a German bunker. And that's the experience we want them to have.
Does that influence the type of information material that you're putting out? Are you trying to make it more almost bite-sized? Do you know what I mean? Because like a TikTok video is 90 seconds long or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And my son learns so quickly. Do you know what I mean? If I try and get him to read a book that I liked when I was young, he's just like, mate, when does it get going? Do you know what I mean? Like, what's all the description? I get it. Just get to the point.
You have to. I mean, if you don't, you lose them. So what we did also on our website is we took every one of our films and we broke them down into 5-minute segments. So on our website, we've got the full documentary, which is an hour to an hour and a half long. But then we took that full documentary and broke it into 5-minute segments so they could sample. And they could say, okay, I'm going to watch 5 minutes today. I'm going to watch 5 minutes tomorrow. I'm going to watch 5 minutes the next day, or I'm going to sample to see if I like this. So again, it's understanding how kids learn. And that's how we present it. I mean, it's not how I want them to learn, it's how they're learning today with technology and everything else. I've got this 1986 computer in back of me because I was a child of the 80s. So that's a Macintosh Plus from 1986, and I've got this, brick phone from 1980, whatever, 1992. And I'll look at that and say, I can't text with this thing. I can't go on Facebook. I can't do all the things I did as a kid. But it helps remind me that times have changed since that time. And my daughter, who's 16, is learning a whole different way. And there's still no substitute for meeting an actual veteran in Normandy, because even though she learns in a different way, Nora, she'll say her most amazing moments are meeting an actual veteran and giving them a hug or shaking their hand. And that's how she learns and how she emotionally connects with a veteran. But in 5 or 10 years, they're all going to be gone. So what happens then? So that's always the question.
I have to agree with you on that. When I was at your 2019 event, we had the veterans and the actors there, and meeting a frogman from World War II, that blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind to meet, what the Navy SEALs were back then. I thought it was amazing. I thought it was, stand out for me. I know you had Brad Freeman there as well, so it's pretty phenomenal. But that frogman, I was done.
He just died too. So that, Ernie Corvese was in the first wave. He went actually in before the first wave to blow up Rommel's obstacles on Omaha Beach in the Easy Red sector of Omaha Beach, which was heavily defended. He jumped in the water in his 8-man boat. And when he jumped in the water, his boat was hit by an 88 or a mortar shell. So he was the only survivor because his boat was filled with TNT. So when he pops out of the water and looks around, his boat's gone. And Ernie just died about 4 or 5 months ago. And when he dies, you lose something. And we were able to bring him back to Normandy. You were able to meet him. So he left that impression on you. And he left that impression on my family and other people who met him there, because what he saw on D-Day was the worst of the worst. And people like that leave an impression that you want to learn more about what these men went through. And I think that is the physical part of meeting them that we're going to lose in 5 or 10 years. And then it's the question of how are those memories preserved? They're preserved through the Pacific. They're preserved through Band of Brothers. They're preserved through Saving Private Ryan or The Longest Day. They'll still be there, but you lose that human contact of shaking their hand and looking in their eyes. And so we have to make sure that they're preserved in some other way. But
that's where the importance, like what you said earlier, is with, I'm sure Diane will back this point up, is having, Matt there, your Tim Matthews, your George Khalil's, your Peter Youngblood Hills, they're representing now that, that they probably didn't realize it at the time when they filmed Band of Brothers or the Pacific. Maybe the Pacifics, they saw the effect of Band of Brothers, but they're now representing that generation and being able to get that message across. I mean, I was at an interest in World War II when I was a kid through Memphis Belle.
Yeah.
I dipped out of it as I got older. Saving Private Ryan, Thin Red Line got me back into it a little bit.
Yeah.
But it was Band of Brothers that got me reading again. And through that, and I wanted to learn more. So I think what the guys do and what you've done in getting the guys across, because they're a representation now of them, and I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I think throughout the years, the actors realize more and more that the importance they have into this legacy and what they bring with them at each event, each podcast. And I think it might be a bit overwhelming sometimes, but I think they really got the importance of it. Yeah,
I think it is overwhelming. We took Rick Warden, who played Harry Welsh, back to Bastogne in 2016, and that was his first Band of Brothers actors event. And he was totally, I mean, like physically and mentally tired, because he was blown away by the reception that he got there and the people who wanted his autograph. And again, that goes back to the whole thing of being, you played somebody, but it's a much more meaningful role. You represented, you know, people know Rick Warden as Harry Welsh, and then they might go and Google what the real Harry Welsh looked like. But I think Rick was just overtaken by the amount of people, especially in Europe, who just wanted to talk with him and looked at him as Harry Welsh. And that's the power of television. And that's the power of Band of Brothers. And that's the power of the legacy that the men left behind, and they left it behind in some way to the actors. And I think there's always that dynamic there where you feel uncomfortable, but you feel like you're carrying on their legacy because they're gone. So, you know, Rick was blown away for his first event. And we've had sessions, autograph sessions that have lasted 5 hours. I mean, 5 hours of people signing autographs. And these are people who've watched Band of Brothers 100 times, not just once. And what does it do for them? Well, it educates them about history. And I think that's the most important thing. It just keeps the conversation going. And we've had people come to our events who've met you guys, you know, 15 or 20 times, but they still just want to talk to you. It might be a different question that they have that they didn't get the chance to ask last time. Did you ever meet Harry Welsh? Did you ever meet Floyd Talbot? Did you ever have a conversation? How did you find out about Floyd Talbot's, you know, likes and dislikes or mannerisms or things like that made you a better actor to portray him? I mean, guys like Frank John Hughes got to meet Bill Garnier. Guys like Robin Lang got to meet Babe Heffron, and they got to get the mannerisms down and everything. And so Jimmy Matteo got to meet Frank Perconti. So there's always that thing where some of the guys didn't get to meet the guys they played, so they connected with their family, and then they became great friends with their family. So it runs much deeper than just a television series. And the people, especially in Europe, who were liberated by these men, I think understand that.
I mean, we had that last year on one of our Zooms, didn't we, Matthew, with Matthew Hickey, who played O'Keefe, and meeting the O'Keefe family, meeting the widow, and obviously, you know, saying that, you know, it's a huge regret for him not meeting Paddy, you know, because he chose school, and you know, one of his huge regrets. So being able to meet his wife 20 years later, his widow, he was taken back by it. And I think everyone on the Zoom, there was a few tears in the house, you know, myself and Matt.
The one with the biggest tears was Rick Warden. When
that's good.
To Colleen Welsh, she was like, you know, when you smile, you've got my grandfather's smile.
Yeah.
You just watched everybody in the box stop.
Yeah.
There's not a tear filter on Zoom, is there?
There's not a tear filter on Zoom.
No.
So I've got a question for Matt then with this end. Obviously, going from what Tim said, obviously, you know, this is your event, your first one with Tim.
Yes.
You know, and being in that, you know, seeing everyone, what was it like for you then? What was it like for you to see everyone's reaction? I know you've done Normandy quite a few times with the World War II Museum on a very much smaller scale. But obviously, this is a lot bigger. So, yeah, what was it like for you?
What, to see people going crazy?
Yeah, just being in that environment with Tim's foundation.
I have been to Bastogne as well before, when they do the signings, and you get there and everybody's out the door in the blizzard, holding a baby in the minus 30 degrees with its wind coming in sideways. Yeah, it is overwhelming. It is pretty crazy. I mean, you know me, I tend to overcompensate by hugging everybody, kissing everybody, and playing with everyone's baby and that kind of stuff. It is overwhelming. But I don't, there are some people that just say, no, that's not for me. That's like, it's a little bit Comic-Con-y or, Galaxy Questy or whatever it is. But I get it. I totally get it. I get why they want to be there. I get why they will want something signed. It's not about me. It isn't about whoever I was with. It's not about Shane. It's about the guy that you have portrayed. And is it the guy that they sort of affiliate you to be? He's not here. Well, you're here. So sign this and I want to meet you and I want to hang out. I get it. I get it completely. I don't find it intimidating. I think it's great. I think it's wonderful. Just as much as I think that if I were to if I were to be able to get hold of Michael Cudlitz and say, mate, can we do a thing on The Walking Dead? He'd just say, no, I haven't got time. Sorry, there's no way I can. I'm busy. I call him and say, man, do you want to come on and talk about Band of Brothers? I just get this thing that just goes, yes, straight away, thinking about yes, like that. Yeah. When he came on and did our Zoom, he was in between talking to his showrunner from Hollywood about some show and some other thing, like some huge deals, but he crowbarred us in. I mean, he sat in his hammock smoking a cigar, like badass. But still, he absolutely, anybody I reached out to just said the same thing, yes, straight away. But if had it been about anything else, any other show that they were in, or, I would never have heard anything back. So it's sort of like, it all sort of held, there's like a network of this.
It is. It is. It's important because they know when they talk about Bull Randleman or they talk about Floyd Talbert that they're just carrying on that legacy. It's not like a role in The Walking Dead, portraying somebody who never existed. If you get that opportunity to talk about what made that guy so special, you're going to take it. And I think that's what's different about this in the Pacific and other Saving Private Ryan, whether it be Barry Pepper or somebody like that. You get the chance to talk about a World War II veteran, you grab that opportunity because it just engages people about something that really did happen, something that really did matter. And I applaud you guys for doing that. Michael was at our first ever event. We flew him in with Bill and Babe and Brad Freeman at Kurt Schilling, who's a baseball pitcher in the United States. He had an event at his house in Rhode Island, and Michael flew in. So Mike came to our first ever event in 2010, and talked about Bull Randleman, and George Lutz Jr. was there to talk about his father, and Chris Langlois was there to talk about his Doc Rowe, his grandfather. And so given the opportunity, these guys know, again, it's just not a role. They'll jump at the opportunity to say anything they can about that man they portrayed or that generation, which is admirable.
So, in your filmmakers, you've been making movies. Let me do the mathematics. 16 years
since 2006. We did our first one. Yeah, we took 5 D-Day veterans back to Normandy in 2006 and said, "Where were you on D-Day? Show us." And they took us to where they were, and where their story played out on D-Day. And then from then, it's grown. And
so I'm assuming they're all sort of special in their own ways, but I'm wondering whether you have one standout vivid memory or one standout film that you just keep going back to, and as a filmmaker think, I can't believe I got to make that, or that was the most amazing story.
I've been to 2 places that have kind of shook me to the core. One, Auschwitz, with an Auschwitz survivor who had a tattoo on his arm. And then Peleliu in the Pacific. And Normandy we've been to so many times, and that's just a magical place for me. That's my go-to place when I really want to appreciate the war and what it meant to people. But as far as like a haunting location, Peleliu for, if you've ever watched the Pacific for those reasons, but Auschwitz to me was probably the most impactful, where I actually felt lightheaded. We went into a crematorium there, a gas chamber there, and I walked the exact route that thousands of Jewish people and Russian prisoners and Polish prisoners walked, and went into a gas chamber, and there were fingernail marks on the wall at Auschwitz, inside the concrete gas chamber, people trying to claw through when the Zyklon B was dropped in, and then 20 feet away were the ovens. So to me, having gone back to such an evil place, and I know you've been back to places like that, whether it be Dachau or other places which the Americans liberated, Auschwitz to me kind of was like one of those places that I had this kind of like, I don't believe in ghosts, but if you can't feel the suffering that went on there, then you're not a human being in some ways. And the guy we brought back was a guy named Izzy Arbeiter, whose job every day was to go around the entire camp with a wagon and remove waste from different facilities. So he went to every part of the camp every day, the Jewish part, the Polish part, the Russian part, the homosexual part, the undesirable part, whatever it is. So every day he would see people lined up in front of the crematoriums thinking that they were going to go take a shower. And he knew what was going to happen to these families, but he couldn't stop his cart to tell them they were about to die. You know, they'd be waiting in these beautiful wooded areas, these beautiful forested areas, because the crematorium were backed up. You know, there was a delay to kill these people, and he couldn't stop and tell them that, you know, you and your 7 other people and your family were about to die. And I think that ate at him after that. And so every day that was his job. And it just, you know, that was the one area, I think, the one place I've been where I've been kind of like, whoa, I have to hold on to something, because it just is a bad place that represented the evil of that whole time period.
And how far as a film are you just telling his story from his point of view, or how far as a filmmaker do you go into that story? Do you ask him? Do you say, does it eat at you? Or you just think there's certain questions I can't ask?
No, I think everything's on the table. And I think with a guy like him, you feel him out and you see the worst thing you can do as a filmmaker is get in the way of a story like that. I think the best thing you can do as a filmmaker is turn the camera on and put a microphone on him and say, okay, Izzy, let's go for a walk around Auschwitz. And then when he walks around Auschwitz, he's just going back in his mind, reminiscing about what it was like in 1942 or 1943. And the worst thing you can do is pepper him with questions. I think you let him talk as much as he wants to talk and reminisces. And then if he pauses and stops for like a minute, then you jump in and ask him a question. But I think you just let him go, you know, in a situation like that. I think the best thing you can do for a veteran or anybody is, once you ask that question, is give them enough time to answer it. Because if you jump in too soon, there may be a thought there that they're just thinking about, and you cut it off. So I've learned, especially from guys like Izzy Arbeiter, that you put a mic on him and say, okay, Izzy, let's take a walk around Auschwitz. And he takes you here and he takes you there. He takes you to the area where his wife was. And his wife, she's like, well, my wife was in this place here. And so you ask them the basic questions about what they went through. But a lot of the times you just let their stream of consciousness come. And I think that's what's so amazing about that generation, is they remember everything. You know, they might not remember what they had for breakfast that morning, but they will tell you what it's like to be in the boy shack in that foxhole, and where exactly their foxhole was, looking over Foy or whatever it is. They remember those details, are seared in their mind. And that's what I find fascinating about that generation, that they won't tell their own family members about what they went through, but they'll share that story with a total stranger who's making a film.
Yeah, I sat next to Brad Freeman on the bus. We'd just done the WWII, and he'd actually wondered around it whether or not he'd spoken. And he just started going on about what he called the Tampa Boy. So I think it was Skip Muck. And he was saying that they asked him to go and try and, you know, pull a bit out, or, you know, try and figure out if there was anything that they could bury or dead dog tags. And he was just going, there was just nothing there. Yeah. There was just nothing there. But you could tell he was seeing it lucidly in his head there. And, you know, he's an old man. I mean, he's 97 years old. Didn't stop him dancing with 22-year-old California girl that set him up with in Zalm's Age.
Who doesn't want to do that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
No, it's amazing. We've had guys, I'd say 98% of the guys, maybe 95% of the guys we've interviewed, a family member has come up after and say, we had no idea that he was awarded a Bronze Star, or we had no idea that he was awarded a Silver Star. We had no idea that he also served in the Philippines in addition to landing on Omaha Beach. There's this wall that they draw around their family members, that they don't want to burden them with the horrors of what they did. They killed people, the things that they saw, the things they experienced. They'll talk to fellow veterans about it, and they'll talk to strangers like me about it. But a lot of the times the family will have no idea that they landed on Omaha Beach, or they were a paratrooper, or that they liberated a concentration camp. So I think they want to preserve those memories, but not necessarily with their own family members.
Yeah, I have my working theory on this, and I'm sure everybody has it, is that like you said, they don't want to burden you with what they saw, but I think they don't want you to know, or they didn't want you to know, so you don't look at them any different. It's like, you are my oasis of calm. I can't let you in on what happened, because you will look at me differently, or I will feel differently towards me.
Yeah.
That's my working theory as to why.
Yeah.
I mean, you want your family to be your family, like your place of peace. You don't want your family to also know that, you had to do this or you saw that.
Maybe they feel of shame as well. Maybe they felt ashamed to have killed a lot of people or do terrible stuff during World War II that would influence, as you just said, Matt, the family point of view about them.
Well, the other thing is you've got to get back on with life. I mean, the boys didn't come back and just join the VA and go to Tim Gray's, stuff every year. They have to get back into life, and you got to pull yourself back into this kind of like normal state. And you start pulling at threads, you're going to fall to pieces.
How do you do that? I mean, how do you?
I don't know.
That's the question even today with guys coming back from Afghanistan, and a while ago it was Iraq. I mean, how do you explain to someone who hasn't been there what you did? And how will they ever understand unless they've been there and experienced it with you? I mean, again, this goes back to the whole citizen soldier. These were young farm boys and city boys who are 17, 18, 19 years old, and they're trained to kill. They're trained to do all these things. And then they're supposed to come home and just, click it and be back to a normal life. And there was no designation of PTSD back then. So these guys came home, some committed suicide, some drank, some beat their kids, some dealt with it perfectly. Some went on and had no problems whatsoever. They were able to separate their life as a soldier with their life post-war. But a lot of guys couldn't do that. And because there was no appreciation of sitting down on a couch and talking to a therapist about what you did. So they weren't encouraged to do that. So, I mean, I'm always amazed by how people deal with coming back from being a normal person, becoming a soldier, and then trying, hey, just be a normal person again. I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah. And this is actually went back to one of the first films I watched of yours about the Bedford Boys, which inspired me to read the book by Alex Kershaw, which is absolutely phenomenal.
It is.
And the ending, where I think it's the lieutenant who comes home and he's the postman, and he delivers obviously mail to a mother whose son didn't come home. That was heartbreaking. Why is he not come home and you have, sort of thing. Yeah. And it was, that done it for me on that book. It's a phenomenal book by Alex. But it was it's what you did with that film that inspired me to read that book and learn more about them. So now when I was in Cornwall, last year, and I'm sure I was at their drop, where they left the UK to go across to France in, I believe it's Treebor Gardens, because they had a little monument there. And again, it's just through your film, reading Alex's book and reading about it, and then being able to identify these things. So so that story about the postman, the lieutenant, and delivering mail, how do you deal with that? And how he must have dealt with that, especially after the mother speaking to him as well. How to make a guy feel worse,
I mean, I think a lot of these guys, and Matt knows, and you guys all know, that every time you talk to a World War veteran, never call them a hero. Never say, you're a hero, because they'll kick you in the knee. And they'll point to Colville-sur-Mer, the cemetery, and say the heroes are there, or the heroes are at the Punch Bowl in Hawaii, or they're at Margraten or Ham or Manila Cemetery. The guys who came back aren't the heroes. We're just survivors. And it was so random. Why do you survive and the guy on your left gets one in between the eyes? And I've always found that fascinating about war, and about World War II especially. I mean, I just watched 1917 again the other day, and the brutality of World War I, but just the randomness of war. Why does someone die? Why does somebody live? And then that survivor has to live with the guilt. Yep. So are they living with the guilt? And does that help them to represent their generation better because they did survive? Do they become better people? Do they work harder to encourage people to learn more about World War II because they did survive? And what about the guys who never came home? What would they have done? Would they have cured cancer? Would they have invented something that made life better for everybody? We don't know. And that's just the randomness of especially that war, where between 50 and 70 million people died when you think about it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you think you really delve down into World War II, and you think about it, the scenarios of where the fighting took place, and how men survived, and the roles other people played in the war as well. African Americans, Japanese Americans, women. Again, we try in our vision as a nonprofit to expand the war to showcase everybody who was involved. The Tuskegee Airmen, we're working on a film now on them. We're working on a film on women in war. We're trying to motivate young girls to say, wow, World War II is big for women. All the men went to fight, and the women went into factories, and the women who were at home cooking one week are building planes the next week. So World War II was big for women. It was big for African Americans. They finally segregated the military, 3 years later. It proved that anybody, despite your gender or your skin color or anything else, you could accomplish great things for a common goal. And I think we've lost a lot of that in the world, that, we're no longer that team anymore. And unfortunately, it seems like the only thing that brings us together as a team are wars. And that shouldn't be the case. It shouldn't be December 7th, 1941, or the Blitz, or 9/11. That brings us together as a society to try and come together to cure the ills of the world. But it seems like the only thing that does that are these moments in time where a country is attacked and has to defend itself, like Britain or the United States or something. And then we all say, wow, we're not Republicans or Democrats, we're Americans, or we're not, Tories, or we're not this, and it just baffles my mind. And that's part of why I think we continue to talk about the blueprint that generation left us, that you can accomplish great things if you work together. But if you're divided, you can't get those things done. And that's what that generation proved, that coming together, we can solve a lot of problems. But do we want to do that these days? I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah. Because everyone's always pulling in different directions.
Especially today. And I think that's why a lot of people are interested in World War II.
Because it's today, a simpler time in a way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It was. And, if you can deem a simpler time, a time when the world was at war and 70 million people died, and there were fascists all over the place, and there were madmen all over the place, if you can deem that a simpler time, then I think you're looking at it in the big picture, where you say, okay, we put all our slight differences aside, and we came together, and everyone came together and proved we could work as a team to accomplish these things. And I think that the possibilities are there, and we've proved that we can do it. And I think when we talk to that generation, they're like, you guys are so far away from our generation, it's ridiculous. And I think in a lot of ways we are, but I think we can still get back to that in some ways, but I don't know how. Maybe you guys do. I don't.
No, but I definitely think that's what fuels the interest in the younger generation, is that they look at the world that they're about to walk into and think, what a shitstorm. Yep. And then there was a time when men they quite simply just got up, left, fight the good fight, put themselves second. Everyone got together. It's a very sort of seductive world to immerse yourself in. I mean, once you start immersing yourself, you realize that it was done because maniacs were rounding people up and killing them in millions. But I can see why, from the perspective of people from Great Britain and America, there would be this interest in the younger generation.
And there's so many stories out there as well. So many stories. I was at Kimbolton last week, drove past it, and, I stood there thinking, my God, what happened? You got Adam Magos's book, with the Ye Old pub. And that story, one aircraft from one place in the middle of England. And I'd love to know how you find these little stories, Tim. How do you go about finding them, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh boy, sometimes it's random. Sometimes someone will just call up and say, listen, I know you're busy, whatever, but here's the story of my dad. And I'll be like, wow, is your dad still alive? And then sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes we'll just read books and find a book, and all of a sudden the veteran's still alive, and we're like, okay, we got to get you back to Europe. We got to get you to the Wall River, where you crossed with the 82nd Airborne. And so a lot of the times it's random. Sometimes you're just, you consume so much information that you say, this would be a great film for the younger generation because it would really motivate them. So yeah, sometimes they drop in your lap, and sometimes you have to go find them. And but our first thought for everything we do is, how do we do it differently? How do we tell a story that's going to motivate a teenager to want to go pick up a book or go online and at least Google a story? So we always have a bunch of questions in the back of our mind before we do it. Is this the kind of thing that some 16 or 17-year-old is going to relate to? Is this a story that a young girl is going to relate to? Is this a story that a young man is going to relate to? Is this a story an African American or somebody else is going to relate to? So we try to cover all our bases. And so there's a lot of research. There's a lot of things that just are lucky. So, a lot of it goes back to like, why was Band of Brothers so successful? Well, Band of Brothers came out 2 days after 9/11. Or the first episode, came out right after, I think it was, Matt, right after 9/11, correct?
First one came out September 9th.
Okay, September 9th. And then second episode, I think. So, Band of Brothers was not only a great story, it was an amazing time in American history for patriotism. So everything kind of clicked in that one time in 2001 where everything came together. So it's a great series. What Spielberg and Hanks did, and Eric Yenderson and everybody else, is they took World War II as a whole and narrowed it down to this one company and these individuals in that company. So they took this global conflict that at a 30,000 foot level is very intimidating to learn about. And they took it to a 5,000 foot level. And you got to know Floyd Talbert, you got to know Perconti, and you got to know Winters and everybody else in a personal way. And I think they were smart in telling those stories because people could relate to those people. So it wasn't the history of World War II, it was the history of a company in the 506th of the 101 in World War II. And other people say, oh, how come they didn't do that about the 82nd Airborne or the 4th Infantry? Or like, it doesn't matter. They were lucky that they did this series about Band of Brothers. The guys in that series were fortunate that they found these guys who were at a reunion in New Orleans, and Ron Drez and everybody else, Ambrose found these stories, and okay, that's great. But they represented all those other small units in World War II. And then people wanted to learn more about the other units in World War II, of the 82nd, of the 4th Infantry, the 29th Infantry, or the British 1st Airborne, or the 6th Airborne. So they were great at taking that global view of the war and narrowing it down to the men who were in one specific company. And I think that was the genius of Band of Brothers. So you got to know Bill Garnier, you got to know his accent, you got to know, everybody else in the series personally, Nixon and his quirks, and Harry Welsh and everybody else. And I think that was the genius of it, that everything about World War II prior to that had been more about the scope of the war. This was about the men in the war and how they dealt with the daily existence of training and jumping into Normandy and fighting in Holland and the Bulge. And so that's the genius of what they did. Took a very complex situation and made it about the men. And that's why it's still popular today, because it's about the men.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it's different from, this is my opinion, from Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan was out 2 years beforehand, but it was based, was based on one or two stories, and they're not real people. Although the opening 15 minutes is absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
But then fast forward, 3 years later, Band of Brothers came out. These were real people. Mm-hmm. You're hearing real stories, and I think having the veterans at the start and the end of each episode, mm-hmm. you find out who they were, at the end of episode 10. It's real people. And I think that's why people have bought into it a lot more. And like I said, reading the books, they've read Band of Brothers, they've read Babe's book, yep. Garnier's book, they've read, yep. Compton's book. And obviously, like I said, they've dipped into other books then and learning more. And obviously my collection's huge because of Band of Brothers. Because of Band of Brothers, my collection, that's how I've done it. I want to read more about other units. And it's probably the same. I don't know. Is that the same for you, Diane?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry. It's Band of Brothers to me was the big introduction for me to World War II, because the more I learned about the troopers, the more I started to read books. And then at this point, when I thought I learned enough about Easy Company, that's when I want to look further, and on different, as you said, Tim, on different division, different battalions that fought in different areas. And as I said to a previous podcast, like I had no information about the Pacific War.
Yeah.
I didn't learn anything about the Pacific War in World War II. And then again, the Pacific was a great introduction to this war. And then again, just started to buy more books about Pearl, about Iwo Jima, about Okinawa. And and even in those books, you find new details you want to look to dig more into and understand why it was that way and not any other way. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think Band of Brothers was a conduit to an entire new way of learning about World War II, and people watched Band of Brothers and are like, wow, then you go to a bookstore today and there are always new books about World War II. Someone's always writing a book trying to write a book about the level of the individual soldier in the war. They're coming out every week. I go to Barnes and Noble here. There's a new book about World War II every week, and they generally are about the personal stories of the guys who served with Patton or B-17 pilots. So Band of Brothers really was this incredible conduit to get people to learn more about the war as a whole by individualizing the stories of the men. Then all of a sudden opens up all of World War II in different units, and not only in the Pacific and Europe, but in the China, Burma, India theater, Merrill's Marauders, and the guys who flew, and everybody else. So, it was kind of like Saving Private Ryan in that regard, that when it came out, people wanted to know more about World War II. So, Band of Brothers was based on truth. So all of a sudden you see books by Buck Compton coming out and Don Malarkey coming out and books by major winners on major winners and stuff. So there's Matt talked about the tentacles earlier. Those were the tentacles. And all of a sudden people felt like, wow, people really want to know about us. And I think that for every veteran, it was such a win-win thing when Band of Brothers came out in 2001, that it was a conduit to opening that door again. And I think
it's interesting because it's sort of slowly occurring to me as we speak, the four of us, that sometimes it's not about what information you're putting out there or what they were showing you putting out there. It's how you deliver it.
Yeah.
And the genius of Band of Brothers it's the same as the Shawshank Redemption. It got guys suddenly could talk and hug other guys after that film. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, there was something like, I didn't know what a bromance was before the Shawshank Redemption.
Andy and Red.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's the same with Band, is that the whole story all the way through, people will look at it and think, that's me and my mates. That's me and my friends. We were in the situation, that's exactly what we would be saying.
Mm-hmm.
And they, no matter what's going on, whether they're being blown apart in Bastogne or they're stuck in a tree or whatever, watching their lunatic officer machine guns some German soldiers or whatever. Do you know what I mean? It's like they can relate to it because it is so personal.
You see it in sports teams now. Sports teams, they refer to, we're a band of brothers. I mean, we're going back to Shakespeare with Band of Brothers. This isn't anything that Tom Hanks and Spielberg and Eric invented. They didn't invent Band of Brothers. That goes back to Shakespeare, okay? But they made Band of Brothers relevant in society again, that when you say, we won the national championship as a college basketball team, we were a band of brothers. So it's become more a representative term for guys who grow close during their training, the games that they go through, although sports is not war. It's just guys growing close together based on the situation that they're in. So we're a band of brothers. That's how people refer to things now. And it's just interesting how they've taken that and applied it to other segments of society. It just means we've gone through some difficult things and some amazing things, and we've grown close together. So now that's kind of the acronym for a lot of different team sports and, winning the Ryder Cup. We were a band of brothers and we were close and everything. So it's gone beyond just a series from 2001. And I think it's gotten that whole Shakespeare thing relevant again. And the story is, I mean, the Pacific did a great job of conveying what conditions were like in the Pacific. It didn't do as good a job of us getting to know the men in the series, because the men were switched out more often than they were with Easy Company in Europe. But Pacific is genius in that it portrayed the brutality of the Pacific and the fight against the Japanese and the conditions, the Coral Islands and the heat and the malaria and everything else they went through. Is genius for that. But it still didn't have the same feeling as Band of Brothers. You didn't get to know the guys as well.
And that goes back to how it's delivered, isn't it? It wasn't quite delivered in the right way for people to get the right impact from it.
Yeah. And the Pacific War was very different than the war in Europe. So to me, Band of Brothers was as different to the Pacific as the Pacific War was as different to the European War in actual World War II. They were totally two different wars. And I think the guys in Europe thought very highly of the guys who fought in the Pacific, because they didn't have the time to drink Calvados. They didn't have the time to, go and meet the farmer's daughter. They didn't have time. I mean, they were dealing in these islands where against an enemy that didn't believe in the Geneva Convention, that was going to kill you, or, wasn't going to take you, prisoner. So the brutality of the war in the Pacific was totally different in a lot of ways to what was going on in Europe, where the Germans and the Americans and the British observed the Geneva Convention. So if you were taken prisoner, you were supposed to be treated fairly as a prisoner. That didn't happen in the Pacific. And these guys didn't get downtime in the Pacific. They couldn't go to that French farm and have some milk, or again, hang out with the farmer's daughter. And so there were two separate wars. And there's a great scene in the Pacific towards the end, I think, when Sledge comes home and the guy who was his cab driver had jumped into Normandy, and says to him, I'm not going to charge you for this cab ride because I jumped into Normandy, but I didn't have to go through all the things you guys went through in the Pacific. And I thought that was interesting, and an interesting part of that series, that they were conveying the difference in the Pacific War and the European War. And but back to Band, I mean, the stories are what people want to hear. Someone said to me once, why People Magazine's still around when all these other magazines have gone out of business? And I said, why? He goes, because people like to know about other people. People are interested in other people. And I didn't really think of that, but he was right. That's why People Magazine is still around in the United States, because people want to know about other people, what they're doing, how they're feeling, their lives and things like that. And I think Band nailed that. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, we've had you for the best part of an hour.
It's my pleasure. It's always great hanging out with you guys.
Yeah. So we'll wind it up if anyone hasn't got any more questions. With one final question.
Oh,
yes.
One final question. What does the future hold for the World War II Foundation?
It's a good question. We've started to really, we have another 8 films that we're working on right now. We've got a film coming up. We leave for Italy soon to film 2 documentaries there on the Tuskegee Airmen, and one on former Senator Bob Dole here in the United States, who ran for president, who was really severely wounded in Italy. So we'll be shooting there. And then next year we go back to Iwo Jima and Peleliu for a couple more films, and then back into Europe for a French resistance film. And so we have a lot of students who come to our museum in Rhode Island too. And again, we've got a lot of rare artifacts there, and the kids are always amazed, because this is the only way they learn about World War II nowadays, is to actually go to a museum. It doesn't seem like it's taught that often in the States anymore. So we just try to engage the younger generation. That's just the goal. Keep talking about it, keep making sure it's out there, keep pointing them towards Band of Brothers in the Pacific and Saving Private Ryan and The Longest Day, and just try to keep the conversation going. I mean, we're just a conduit, like you guys are, for keeping the conversation going. And that's all we are, is a conduit. But there have to be conduits, so we don't forget about these men and women.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an unstoppable thing now. I can never stop now.
Yeah, no, you can't. You're locked
People
in.
won't let me know. I was in
Normandy.
I was in Normandy recently. People are just like, we have to see you, brilliant, man. Anything you want me to do, I I've got this idea. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. We'll make it happen.
Oh, it's amazing to see the reaction of, I mean, your hair could be long, you could have a beard, but when you're in St. Côme du Mont and there are a bunch of reenactors there, they know who you are. There are a bunch of Dutch or French or Germans playing 101st Airborne guys. So, you could look scruffy, and they're going to know who you are. Or Nick Aaron could be, playing it with his band Nashville Exile, and they know who Nick is. I mean, Nick could have a goatee and a scally cap on and everything. I mean, they just are so familiar with the series that they can pick you guys out anywhere and want to connect with you, which I always love watching. I really do. I like to watch. And that's one of the things I like to watch, saying, Matt may not look 100% like he did in the series, but these guys know you right away. And boom, you're in the middle of a group picture with you and Tim Matthews and, other guys and stuff, and Peter Youngblood Hills. And that's the legacy that you have. And especially when you go to a place like Normandy, or Margraten or Eindhoven or Bastogne, they're going to know you right away.
There's always some large reenactor girl trying to get a kiss.
Oh my God, we're not going to talk.
Train has left the stage. There's no brakes on that train. It's happening, just so you know. When she's...
You had to pick a guy you want to give a hug to a guy who's 6'5", and he looked like he was about ready to swallow you. He looked like he was going to pick you up like you were an hors d'oeuvre and eat you. And he wasn't buying it. He didn't want a hug from you, which I was surprised. And I'm glad you lived. I'm glad you lived to tell the tale.
I'm 47 years old. I have escaped many a beating and near killing. I'm still very quick on my feet, backwards. Yeah. I can flee like no other man. Fleeing is, I could be an Olympic fleer. Don't worry about it.
You should have. Yeah, I thought you were going to have to at that point, but that's a podcast, I think, for another day. But let's just say not everyone is open to a hug.
From me. I've been in a hole for a week. Get lost.
Not everyone wants physical
leech contact. I could have just stroked him. I'll tell him it's been an absolute pleasure, mate.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's good seeing you guys again, and thank you for everything you guys do. And it's great to meet such nice people, and people who all have the same interest. And you guys keep it moving forward. And I think that's an amazing thing.
Cool.
I do have one more question, Tim.
No, we're done.
He's actually walking off.
He's actually left. Gone. For those of you who don't have visuals, he's actually left.
He's back. You mentioned the VR work that you're doing. Where can people access that?
It's right on our website. So, and it's also on Oculus Quest, and YouTube has a VR channel. So we've shot 2 so far. We did a Normandy Omaha Beach experience, and we did one at Pearl Harbor, and we shot one in Bastogne. That's almost done. And then we're shooting one in Italy for the Tuskegee Airmen as well. And it's really the first reaction when the kids put the big viewing goggles on is, wow, you're standing in the water at Omaha Beach and you can reach out and almost touch things. And again, this goes back to how kids are learning these days, which is visual, and they want that wow factor. And it's not a video game. You're not shooting anybody, but you are standing on Omaha Beach, and we put you in the American Cemetery at Colville-sur-Mer, so you can turn around 360 degrees or 180 degrees and read the headstones like you're standing there. So the goal is to get them there like in a virtual field trip, in the hopes that one day that they'll actually will go there and stand in that cemetery and read the names of those 17 and 18-year-olds who are there, or at a Commonwealth cemetery, to read the names as we did behind Gold Beach, and to see the brothers who are buried together, or to see the unknowns who are there. So right now we're taking them on a visual field trip in the hopes that when they get older, that they'll want to go to a place like Normandy or Bastogne or Hawaii, and read the real names off of the Stars of David and the White Crosses. So
sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's important. It really is.
Cool stuff.
Yep.
Well, I'll let you get back to disciplining Nora.
I got a phone call anyway. I think it's hello.
It's a phone call from 1983.
It's Michael J. Fox is calling me. Hold on. Hey, Mike.
Is that not Zach Morris? No.
Someone just said, "Come on, Eileen," in the phone or
Yeah.
something like that. It's
Jimmy
Texas
Jimmy
Midnight
Carter's
Runners.
trying to get hold of you. Jimmy Carter's trying to get hold of you, mate. Yeah. Come and work on my peanut farm. Well, I'll let you go.
Okay, well, thank you, guys.
Great. One day we should collaborate. Make
Okay.
make a 20-year-on Band of Brothers documentary. How about that?
I'll try that. Yes, we got enough interviews with you guys, so that would be something. HBO may not like it. I might get another call from HBO saying, "Don't do it." So I don't know.
I'll make it happen. Don't worry, I'll make it
Thank
happen.
you.
I still
Thank
got
you.
people who know people up there.
That's exactly. Yeah, that's the important part.
All right, Tim. Great. Say love to Sheila.
All right. Thank you, guys. Good seeing you.
And that other reprobate daughter of yours, whose name I won't say out loud.
Please don't.
She may appear. All right, lads, ladies, and
All
gentlemen.
right, guys.
All right,
Take
dude,
care.
bye.